You can't win your fantasy football draft in the first round, but you sure as hell can lose it. We reveal our 2023 first round redraft rankings tonight on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast.
Cause I've been in tune, out of touch, coming off the bench, trying to shake the funk, check a stat line, see who's up, that over under hit too clutch.
And I'm trying to avoid getting carried away with the jet sweep, sleeping on a trick play, predicting all of my moves like they seen every play. So I'm running it back, head down, get out of my way. And it's for the law with only one thing to do. I guess I'll say a prayer and put it all on the line for you. What they don't know, something they haven't seen. I find a gap on the screen and hit them right in between. Yeah, I got it, and I got it.
Just one thing to say, yeah, what they don't know, something they haven't seen. I'm off that mean Joe Green, it got me fading between. Yeah, I got it, and I got it. The In Between Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right. It is May 30th, 2023. The summertime and what feels like the start of the redraft fantasy football season is here. We rope in tonight the first round on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, and we are joined by a man who not only has camped all over the state of Washington, but he was also nominated for an FSWA award. He studied bees in Sweden at one time, believe it or not. All this while keeping it very in between. Mr. Scott Rynier. What's up, Scott?
Hey, Seth. Happy to be here. Redraft season, so I'm busting back out the shirt that I'm going to wear till it disintegrates. Let's ride. I can tell you there aren't very many Broncos in my top 12. Start there, but yeah. You know, had a great Memorial Day weekend. The sun was out in Seattle. Got to hang out with some family. Took in a Mariners game. Got to see their ace pitch.
Yeah.
They won. It was just a great weekend.
Man, Memorial Day is all what America's about. It was a great weekend overall. I hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. And tonight, as you allude to, Scott, this is our first round rankings show. We're going to go through the top 12 and a couple more honorable mentions. And we'll also get to some front and center. We're going to discuss D-Hop. What does him leaving Arizona mean to Hollywood Brown? Michael Wilson, some other wide receivers on that wide receiver core. And then Jimmy G, the injury, all that going on and more. Joining us tonight on the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, we have the IBT family, Albert in the back end. Good evening, IBT. Good evening to you, Albert. Thanks so much for tuning in, man. We appreciate it. If you guys enjoy this type of content, please give us a thumbs up. If you want to join the family, just click that subscribe, ring the bell, come back and hang out with us, Albert, everyone along the way. And Scott, before we jump into our regularly scheduled program, I did want to talk about some changes coming to the site I'm very excited about. The first one is that we have been a typically long form content program. That's with our podcast and with our columns as well on the website. And we're going to shrink that down. We're going to do a lot more shorter form blogs, articles, fantasy football, still lifestyle as well, and a little bit of everything. I'm excited for this move, Scott. Really, it's going to be more of us than anything. But we're just saying goodbye to some things we really love, like the Mondays and my powerful playlist column and a lot of good other content on the site here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. The new direction. I mean, I'm still probably going to write a Mondays every now and then, but it's going to be a lot more, like you said, short form driven. Pulp fantasy will still exist, but it will be a little bit, some big splashy episodes mixed in with just some more shorter, quick hit, more frequent content. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited to jump on stories as they're happening and, just put more out there. So yeah, I'm excited.
And I think this all comes back to the one question I always want to try to answer to our YouTube audience and to our readers as well. How can we best serve the IBT community? And this was that decision, and this is what went into that. So super excited for this next chapter as it unfolds for our company here. Also want to chat a little bit about the show and some different things happening here lately as well. If you guys have noticed, we've been a little more vacant here the last couple episodes. Nate Polvo, one of the very, very great faces of this company, of this podcast, has stepped away from the company. Nate will always, remain in our hearts as a friend, and he played a big role in getting this company where it is today. And it's just one of those things that sometimes you're on two different paths, and it's something in life that we have to remember, Scott, that everything is not forever. So we appreciate while we have it. And I appreciate Nate. I appreciate his support. And for right now, Scott, you're going to still be here every other week. And then we're going to have a guest host filling in for us on the weeks you're not here with me as well. Tuesday nights, 9:30 p.m. You know the deal here. Scott, any words as we kind of transition into this next chapter here? And obviously, shout out to Nate and the poll votes and everything they did for us here at IBT.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Nate, Jen. I mean, where you call your place of employment or where you're doing your content, it obviously is important, but that's not the most important thing. Like Nate, and Nate's gonna go on and do great things because he's Nate and Jen. It's just unfortunately not with IBT at this point. So, but Nate's my brother from another mother. We have a lot in common. So wish him all the best. Yeah. And
yeah, good vibes. Good vibes, man. Yeah, we're going to keep rolling on here. We appreciate everyone's support along the way. Let's go ahead and jump into it here. A little bit of front and center.
Sometimes taking that first step out the door is the hardest thing to do. Give it a chance, you'll be begging for more. Save the spot just for you. We're all somewhere in between. How about you come to the place where you have some fun? Ain't gotta worry about knowing not what it means. Come and give me another, cause the night is young. At least I so thought.
This just in. Breaking news. Front and center.
All right, Scott, front and center here. Biggest topic we can't get past is Cardinals. They released wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Averaged over 9 targets last season, still seemed to have it 80 yards per game. That was with a mix of Kyler Murray, Colt McCoy, and our guy Trace McSorley from up here in State College. How do you feel about this, Scott? Let's start with him. Can he go somewhere and be a target hog like he was last season in those limited games played?
I think he can. I mean, he's approaching the age cliff for wide receivers, but I mean, the age cliff for wide receivers and running backs for that matter, it's a kind of more of a reference point. It doesn't necessarily apply to every single player. I mean, just look at Derrick Henry with the running backs, but no, I think I don't think he's washed, term that likes to get thrown around a lot. I mean, he's one of the most talented wide receivers I've ever had the pleasure of watching play. I'm grateful he was in his prime during, let's call it my prime of fandom. So I think he still has it. I mean, depending on the situation, I mean, any team he walks onto, he'll be among the best wide receivers on the team. As far as being like the target hog we're used to seeing, probably not if he goes somewhere with some established players. But I've seen the speculation. I honestly have no idea where he's going to end up.
It seems like it's a contender somewhere, Scott. That's what we're hearing, is that he wants to go win a chip. So any tea leaves, that any like wish list that you would put out there for D-Hop?
Yeah, the Chiefs.
Okay, that's yeah. I
mean,
agree.
Okay, if D-Hop goes to Kansas City and is not cut at least some semblance of D-Hop, then we just know why. Then we'll just know for sure wide receivers don't work in Kansas City. It's tight ends, and that's it. But I mean, yeah, as far as a wish list, I mean, Mahomes to Hopkins with Kelce. I mean, right now their number one is Kadarius Toney, according to them. And then there's definitely some talent in that wide receiver room, but there's no true number one receiver there at all. Their true number one receiver has been Travis Kelce since Tyreek left. So yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, I've heard Buffalo's name thrown around as a potential landing spot. Trying to think of other teams where it might be, there's definitely some places I don't want him to go.
Yeah, brace for impact. That's what I was going to say, Scott, because if you are a manager of OBJ or Zay Flowers in Dynasty, Baltimore would be a terrible place. Rashad Bateman, same thing. And if you're a Gabe Davis manager and it's Buffalo, we're kind of seeing those tea leaves as well. Allen Lazard to the Jets. We've seen the Jets logo posted on some social media of D-Hops this week, alluding to maybe a regrouping up there in New York. So it could be devastating for another fantasy asset, at least for 2023 here.
Yep, it could be.
So we'll hold on to that thought here. We'll keep you updated with DeAndre Hopkins, where he lands here. Until then, we can look at Hollywood Brown. I think he's the biggest beneficiary from this move of the Cardinals pass catchers, on pace for over 1,000 yards yet again last season, Scott. However, he has just one wide receiver 2 season in his first 4 of his career here. So really good in targets last season, really good in target share, but just needs some more red zone looks and more efficiency to really take that next step into being a high-end wide receiver 2. Do you think he can do it this season when we don't really know who the quarterback's going to be, possibly Colt McCoy or Clayton Tune?
I think it's possible, but I won't have him ranked as a wide receiver 2. He'll be a wide receiver 3. I haven't gone through and done much beyond what we're going to talk about tonight with redraft rankings, but just thinking about all the other wide receivers and the quarterback situation in Arizona with Kyler missing time. Is it going to be Colt McCoy or, this new sexy sleeper Clayton Tune? It just doesn't bode well for that passing game, at least early on in the season. So, I think he's super talented. I think he's doing his absolute best to buck the trend with smaller wide receivers. He's doing his best. He just hasn't yet put together a full, complete season. I don't know if that's, with kind of the turmoil in Arizona at this point, I don't know if that's possible. I think he'll lead the team in targets, in wide receiver targets for sure. I think this bumps up a few other players more on the periphery. Trey McBride, highest drafted tight end last year, didn't do much his rookie year, but spoiler alert, no tight ends do well their rookie year. So he's someone I've got my eye on later in drafts. And then not necessarily as much in redraft, but Michael Wilson, kind of somewhat pretty. You're muted. Slept on good draft capital wide receiver that came out. He's going to be a rookie this year. I got him in the 4th round of a rookie draft, a day 2 wide receiver in the 4th round. So
Stanford pride, baby.
So, he gets, what that bump looks like for a rookie wide receiver with that quarterback situation, I'm not sure, but it's better than it was when Hopkins was there. Now, Zach Ertz, it's really tough to tell. He's up there in age. He's battled injuries. I don't know if the torch gets passed to McBride this year or if they just split to the point where neither is valuable. Really, I'm just kind of avoiding the Cardinals at this point for the most part.
Marquise Brown, wide receiver 35 right now on Underdog. I would be tempted at that price because I think he's going to be a garbage time hero. Like, garbage time counts too, and I think that's what we're going to get. Cardinals only projected to win 4 games this season, Scott, so they're going to be playing from behind quite a bit. And I see Hollywood kind of cleaning up here late. It might not be pretty. It might be one of those days. Don't check your lineup for the first half of the early games, but it might happen.
Well, and I'm picturing, because the way I draft typically, I go into most drafts, even Dynasty, I don't have like a regimented, written out strategy. So especially in redraft, there comes points where it's just like, I got a list of players and I know the ones I want at that range. Like, they stand out from the crowd. Whether I'm right or wrong, the season will tell. Wide receiver 35, if he's sitting there, where the other wide receivers I can picture around that spot.
Right in Treylon Burks, Gabe Davis, Dotson, Deontay Johnson. That's kind of the range.
He'll be a name that stands out amongst that group if he stays as a low end 3, wide receiver 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yep, I'm with you there. I am intrigued by Hollywood Brown in redraft this season. Let's move on to another situation that could shake out redrafts.
What is going
Jimmy
on?
Garoppolo underwent a foot surgery here recently. We figured this would be, if it was going to happen, to be closer to the season when he hurt that foot. But he has signed a waiver in place of a physical. And what this means for fantasy football, what this means is there's an addendum C or G, addendum? Addendum. Thank you, Scott. That allows the Raiders to cut Jimmy Garoppolo, but before any time that he's played, before they owe him any money, if he has not passed a physical at some point. So we don't know if that's totally going to happen. We talked a couple weeks ago here with our guy Will Teague on the podcast that I'm scared of Devontae Adams at the wide receiver 7 price tag. Now that we know. Maybe it's Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue, the rookie, leading this thing. Maybe it's Brian Hoyer, the vet of the Josh McDaniels system. Or maybe it's Jimmy G, who's not 100% healthy coming into the season, which is always a story with Jimmy G. How do you feel about that price tag for Adams and other pass catchers here?
I mean, I don't really think about any. Josh Jacobs and Devonta Adams are who I'm thinking about when I'm thinking of the Raiders. That's pretty much it. I actually still kind of, I mean, I know this is red flag city we've got here.
That's how I feel, man. I want to be as far away from them.
For me, it's red flag city for the quarterback situation. I just don't really care that much who plays quarterback with Devonta Adams. Now, I mean, here's the thing. So I think wide receiver 7 is fine. I'm still, I guess on the optimistic side that Jimmy G will start. He's a competent quarterback. Devonta Adams will still be mostly Devonta Adams. I mean, I currently have him as my wide receiver 5 after Tyreek Hill. So wide receiver 7 sounds good to me. To me, the only reason he's not up with those other guys is because of this quarterback situation. I mean, all he's ever done, at least as of late. I mean, even last year with Derek Carr, who was not liked by the team and being, sat on the bench, he still led the league in target share. He was still the wide receiver. What was he? Wide receiver 4 in points per game. So he's still put that up even in those, less than ideal circumstances. So again, so that he was wide receiver 4. I'm not going that high because even, if Jimmy G doesn't play, then whatever they end up throwing out there is not going to be as good as Derek Carr. I mean, we know that. But that's why if you get back down towards wide receiver 6, 7, 8, down in that range, I'm still fine with it because he's still going to be a target hog. He's just, I think his ceiling of being the overall wide receiver 1 is not there.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs going RB9, 27th overall. He might be a value if there is some quarterback issues there. Jacoby Myers, wide receiver 54. Renfro, 77. So probably gonna fall even more if there is some QB issues here. Those guys you can take a shot. I would be more interested in Michael Mayer, 16th round right now of redrafts, going as tight end 23. I think whoever's the quarterback is going to target him quite a bit. So I'm on Mayer, but I think outside of that, I will pass on these guys. And yeah, I was just not a fan of Devontae, but I totally understand that you're riding ship with him. Track record says that. Let's move on to Anthony Richardson here. He's splitting first team reps. Spelled team wrong on this. But Scott, how high is too high for Anthony Richardson? Currently QB 10 going in the middle of the 8th round. Are you comfortable paying that price for a rookie quarterback out of Florida, which we haven't seen a ton of production?
So Richardson for me in redraft at least. And I mean, the splitting first team reps is not surprising. It is still, I mean, I guess we're almost to tomorrow or a couple days we're in June, but it's still early. And I mean, out of all the rookie QBs that came in, he's seen as the least ready. So the fact that he, I would be shocked if he just took the reins immediately and was first team starting quarterback starting in May. That would honestly shock me more than this split, even, spilling into training camp come this summer. But I still have faith that he's going to be the starter for the majority of the season in Indianapolis. And QB 10, it depends a little bit for me. I'm looking at him a little bit like I looked at Trey Lance a few years ago. Now, obviously Trey Lance didn't work out that year, but yeah. I was willing to scoop up one of those guys later in the draft. Trey Lance was going later than Richardson is going now. So it was a little less of a risk. That's QB 10 is a little high for redraft. But I am the type that would potentially take him there and then, round it out with Kirk Cousins or just some veteran who I know is going to not kill me, but probably not win my league for me.
Aaron Rodgers, QB 15, Geno Smith, QB 16,
Yeah,
Goff,
somebody like that.
QB 17. Yeah.
Somebody like that. Yeah.
I'm right there with you, Scott. That would be so. I don't mind taking Anthony Richardson because it's a lottery ticket. That's what you're taking at that pick. As much as you're taking a talented, perhaps lethal rookie quarterback there, you're punching your lottery ticket. It might win out, or it might be like a Trey Lance from a couple years ago and doesn't do it. I'm willing to take that risk.
If you're in a redraft that has, I'm in a couple redraft leagues that also have a couple of keepers potentially, where you keep somebody based on the round you drafted them. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yes.
Because I typically, if I go pretty early on QB, I typically stick with one QB in redraft if it's a one QB league, obviously. But then my other strategy is somebody like Lance or Richardson paired with a later round guy, and just see what happens. So if he climbs much higher than that, I probably won't be willing to take that risk. But it's all going to be based on, what my team looks like with
too.
Well, and what my team looks like when I get to that point in the draft. Can I afford to take that flyer, or is there like a running back or a receiver I really need? So, but I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for the Colts. I don't know if it's going to all click this year, but I'm excited for Richardson and the Colts.
Absolutely. Me as well. We've talked at length about Richardson on the podcast this offseason, so we won't talk about him tonight, but we will talk about our top 12 ranking heading into the redraft season. So let's do that in some temperature check.
Temperature check.
That's really spicy. Holy shit.
All right, temperature check. Let's get into it here, Scott. And the reason I wanted to do this tonight is I thought this was an opportunity where best balls are heating up. They're cranking up more than ever. We're going to talk about it later, but some different tournaments in the industry are starting to begin as well. Or at least invites are going out. So people are kind of getting ready. Even the more casual players, I think, are starting to pay a little bit more attention. The summer has started. Memorial Day has passed. Things are slowing down in the NFL for the time being. So let's talk about it here. And let's start with our consensus 101. And I will say we were tied with this week. So I do say consensus, but 101 and 102 could have swapped back and forth. And no doubt about, though, it is Justin Jefferson. This is who we're saying if you have the first pick in your draft, you should be considering Justin Jefferson. Wide receiver 6, 4, and 1 to begin his career. Almost 130 receptions last season, 1,800 yards, and 9 total touchdowns. However, we do have the talented rookie Jordan Addison coming into Minnesota. Dalvin Cook's future, though, also unknown. So a lot of question marks here, Scott, with the Minnesota Vikings, second year in that Kevin O'Connell system. How do you like Justin Jefferson? Do you think he finishes as possibly the number one player in fantasy here in 2023?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't bet against him being the overall wide receiver one again. I mean, Jordan Addison is coming in, but wow. Adam Thielen. I blanked on his name for a second, but he's now gone. Same quarterback. They basically gutted their defense. I think they're going to be in a lot of pass happy games.
Even more.
Playing from behind. So, I think, if it's possible for Jefferson to potentially outdo himself this year, I think he could. He's shown it. Leader in targets per game last year. Hold on. Dog likes to interrupt me, and I don't see why that would change. I'm a huge Jordan Addison fan, but not to the point where it's going to cut into if Jordan Addison was joining with Adam Thielen, then it might be something. But it's those two guys and TJ Hawkinson. That's it. That's really it. So yeah, he is definitely a candidate for first overall. Second guy, well, if you want to talk about Jefferson.
So briefly, I'll just say the only concern I think is that we know it's Kirk Cousins. So we know he's never going to throw 50 touchdowns. And I think that was the only thing that kind of held him back last season. is he was under his projected touchdowns, which were just over 11. He had 9 total, 8 receiving. That he had that 1 rushing as well. But Thielen's no longer there, and Thielen's always been kind of a touchdown hog as well. So that could potentially open the double-digit touchdown ceiling open it back up for Justin Jefferson here. So I think I'm a little mixed on him overall. 10th in target share as well. So I would like to see that increase. But how many times, Scott, I don't know if you had a lot of exposure to Jefferson last season, but it was so frustrating because he'd score about 17 points in the opening drive and then just nothing for a large part of the second half. And it was maddening. I know Minnesota Vikings fans didn't like what would happen a lot of the time as well. So overall, though, I think he is a safe number 1 here. But go ahead and introduce the 102 on our list, Scott.
So this is 102. If we're being transparent, this was my 101. But it's Christian McCaffrey. And to me, it's a 1A and a 1A between him and Jefferson, really. What gave the edge to Christian McCaffrey for me is I honestly think that he's more likely, and I know Austin Ekeler exists, he's more likely to, give you more of an advantage as the first overall running back than Jefferson is as the first overall receiver. What I mean by that is I feel like there's a good 4 receivers who easily could finish as the wide receiver 1 this year. Jefferson, I feel like, is the most likely, but I think there's 4. There's only 2 or 3 running backs that I would say that about. And so that's where I mean, McCaffrey in San Francisco, I mean, there was some misguided concern about his volume once he got there, but, he maintained about a 70% opportunity share. If you look at his points per game when he was in Carolina and then what they were in San Francisco, it was 1.5 points higher. Once he got to San Francisco, he scored 1.5 points more points per game once he got there. Led the league in running back target share. And I mean, we'll get to Ekeler later, but the reason I give that, even though Ekeler just finished as the RB1, the reason I give McCaffrey the edge over Ekeler is he gets a little bit more rushing work. He is less reliant on touchdowns than Ekeler, in my opinion. And so I just think McCaffrey with full season in San Francisco, barring injury, he's still my 101. But again, I'm totally fine taking Justin Jefferson 101 as well, which that's growth for me. I would have never considered taking a wide receiver number 1 overall in redraft 5 years ago. No way. So I like it.
Well, and I think you hit on a very important note why we like Christian McCaffrey so much. It is because he could be a rushing factor here in 2023, folks. I think that's something we need to keep in mind here because we don't know about the quarterback situation. Is it Purdy? Is it Sam Darnold? Is it Trey Lance? We don't really know. But with no real threat of a receiving game or passing game possibly being here, they're gonna have to rely on him even more. We took him last postseason to have the most rushing yards in the playoffs, Scott, at a very favorable number, and we cashed that ticket. If you remember, it was one of our favorite postseason props. And now we're coming back to the point where I would get on some season-long bets for Christian McCaffrey as well. If you can find a bet for most rushing yards for a running back, I think he could be a candidate. I really like CMC this year as well, Scott. So it's a little bit uncertain there in San Francisco. And I think CMC is the one notable name, man. He didn't lose a step when he went there. So
yeah. And I mean, I don't think we're going to hit 29 points per game like he did. And I think it was 2019. I don't think he's going to get there because Elijah Mitchell will still be involved. He's not going to have this 90% opportunity share like he did in Carolina. But 24, 25 points per game, I think is easily there. So I think he's still just the CMC that is seen as basically the RB cheat code. And I think he's still that. And now he's on an offense like San Francisco. Sign me up.
Yeah, want to address the chat here. We got Craig saying, can't wait to see where Jamison Crowder lands. Fingers crossed. Love it, Craig. Yeah, no Jamison Crowder on tonight's show. Maybe when maybe we'll do a ranking show for like the 29th round here, Scott, and maybe we can get Crowder on.
Yeah.
Oh, we got Yeet Man saying, when will ESPN update their ADP? I'm getting Olave in the 4th round. Wow, that's great to see, Yeet Man. And I will say, ESPN is a very sporadic ADP updater.
Yep.
That is somewhere that you can really, really take advantage of your league mates, because if they're coming in fresh off the streets and they're not doing their homework here in the offseason like you are here, Yeet Man, I think you're going to have a very advantageous draft because you can take advantage of some of those differences in ADP because if you've been over on Sleeper or doing some best balls on Underdog, Olave is going around end of the second round, early third round. And Scott, at that price tag, I've told you I'm out at that price tag. But if I can get Olave in the fourth here on ESPN, that is some really, really good notes there. So, Yeet Man, I'm not sure. I can't tell you when they're going to update it for sure. I can tell you that 4for4 has a really good Underdog ADP tool that you can check out kind of where they're going on there. A lot of industry people are playing on that and a lot of diehards. So if you want to see kind of up to date rankings, that's kind of going to be your best bet here.
That brings up a good point though. Good strategy is to know your league mates. And if you know that most of them are sitting, because if you're drafting on ESPN, and I've done tons of drafting on ESPN, and if you can see, you won't be able to really tell. I mean, you might be able to know from past seasons and just tendencies of your league mates. But if you can see that players are pretty much going at that ADP that ESPN is spitting out, you can take advantage of that. Because you can grab somebody like Olave, who, everybody, and the best is when a league mate thinks you're reaching because they're way down the ADP list, and you're like, no. So anyway, good. It's a great strategy to know if you come with your own rankings or your own tiers, then pay attention to that because you can take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I'm going to drop that Underdog ADP tool for you in the chat there. It's there for you, Yeet Man. You can kind of see what's going over there and some best balls here. And thanks for the question, man. Hope you're subscribed to the channel. Come back and hang out with us again here. Scott, let's go ahead, though. We have another wide receiver we're going to talk about here. It's Ja'Marr Chase, a wide receiver who 2 straight wide receiver seasons for him, wide receiver 5 as a rookie, and then wide receiver 12 last season, but only in 12 games. Led the NFL in red zone targets, 22 TDs in 2 seasons. However, he's not a reception hog like Justin Jefferson. He's not a reception hog like some of these other receivers here. Never had over 90 in his career. What do you make of Chase here at 3? Is it too high for you?
Not really. I have a different wide receiver at 3, and then I have Chase at 4. But no, he's one of the. Oh, sorry, hold on. My dog comes in, opens the door, and then the whole house is anyway. Chase is one of the receivers I mentioned who I think could finish as the overall wide receiver 1. So with Chase, I mean, he was wide receiver 6 in points per game. So I mean, it looks a little better from that perspective. And again, not as many games, but he was number 2 behind only Justin Jefferson in targets per game. So he actually was more of a target hog than I had thought until I looked back at it.
Yeah.
I was thinking of his rookie year where it's like Higgins is there, and Higgins is the more possession guy who's getting a lot of targets, and Chase is getting the big splash plays and long touchdowns. But no, Chase is going to eat. And his target share, I have it as the 8th highest target share, but you have to keep in mind when you're just looking at straight target shares that, you have to take into context the market share. So the targets that they're sharing from, and Cincinnati's market of targets is high. Yes. They were top 10 in pass rate, top 10 in wide receiver target share last year. So 8th highest is actually pretty good. When it's like 25% of the Cincinnati passing game is better than 30% of the Tennessee passing game, if that makes sense. So again, he's one of those guys. I think he's a foundational piece. He could easily finish as the wide receiver 1.
I would like to see Chase take the next step that we saw Justin Jefferson take last year, where Chase has been making his money on these deep goes and also in the red zone. And we need to see him more in the middle of the field, lower the ADOT just a little bit. I think that will bring the catch rate up as well. That's what we're looking for Ja'Marr Chase to take the next step. And if he can contend for that wide receiver 1 slot. Let's go ahead and move on to number 4 here. This is where I kind of put the end of my first tier. Scott, I think the top 4 are kind of in their own tier. Our rankings kind of put that as well. Austin Ekeler here for the Chargers. Worked out an incentive deal. We were worried a couple weeks ago might go into a Le'Veon Bell situation. That's not the case. The king of TDs is back. over 38 TDs in the last 2 seasons. We know the wide receivers here tend to miss some games. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. It could lead to even a bigger workload for Austin Ekeler, but it's Kellen Moore now calling plays. Could that change things, Scott?
It could. I mean, again, I gave McCaffrey, if we're just looking at the RBs, I gave McCaffrey the edge over Ekeler. I have Ekeler at 5th overall in mine. The fact that he's back with the Chargers obviously is ideal. I think they utilize his skill set, as we've seen over the last 2 seasons, better than any other team could. So any other team would be a hit for him. My only concern, and the reason I give the edge to McCaffrey, is he was a bit touchdown reliant. I think but he's done it for 2 straight seasons, so it's hard to argue against it. But I feel like there is some touchdown regression coming. There's a stat where it's market share of team TDs. So how many of the team's TDs do you score? And you look at it for the different positions. He was at 47%, which is insane for a running back. It's an insane number for a running back. And I looked up his kind of, if you divvy up his fantasy points, how many of them came from touchdowns? How many of them came from not touchdowns? He was right around 30%, which is really high. The only people that were higher than him, the highest ranked player in that group was like RB20. So it's just, the numbers don't seem sustainable. And since he's a little bit more reliant on that and has a little bit of a less of a rushing volume, that's why I give the edge to McCaffrey, but he's still within my top 5 because that's 2 straight years now. He's done it. And I just freaking love it because he's an undrafted free agent.
I know.
And he embraces the fantasy community, and he's one of my favorite players.
I'm so happy we can get back on the horse with Austin Ekeler, Scott. It's good to see it because we did have question marks, but now like he's the RB2 for me, and I don't think I have a lot of question marks about it. I think he'll be a great once again this season. Want to address some more questions here in the chat from Yeet Man. He's saying, how should I figure out where players are actually should be going? Is doing a mock draft with them smart? He says, I don't want to have a draft strategy and get absolutely sniped. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say 2 things. First thing I'm going to say is I'm going to drop the Fantasy Pros mock draft wizard tool. Very helpful. I really enjoy this tool, and it's not just because I work for them, but they are really helpful to seeing where ADP is going to shake out, to quickly assessing some different strategies. And what I'm also going to say here, Yeet Man, is that you shouldn't go in with one set strategy. You need to keep. A lot of people say keep it water in this industry. We say keep it in between, because maybe you have a strategy, but when people zig, sometimes you have to zag, and sometimes players just fall to you, and you have to go against what you thought you were going to do going into it. Scott, what do you have to say here for Yeet Man with some really great insight, really great questions overall tonight?
I mean, I concur with what you said. The Fantasy Pros tool is excellent. Mock drafting, it's good practice. You have to know it's not going to play out that way, but it's at least good practice. There was one season, I think it was a couple of years ago, where I really didn't do a lot of mock drafts, and I felt it when I went to do my real drafts. Like I felt a little bit of that rustiness. So the mock drafting is great. And I mean, Seth, you hit it. Like same for me. Like I don't ever set out with, I'm going 0 RB here no matter what, or I'm going hero RB here no matter what, or I'm going RB no matter what. Because especially in some of my leagues, like sometimes people make wacky picks early in drafts, and all of a sudden somebody's sitting in your lap, and all of a sudden I've gone wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, and I wasn't planning on it, but I could not pass it up. So, I mean, you have to be flexible and fluid and kind of take what you can have a general strategy. You can have a general strategy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I concur with what you said.
I just want to tell a funny story, Scott, that you kind of mentioned in there that brought this up. But last year in the Scott Fish Bowl, this is a league that very favors quarterbacks. So I was targeting a quarterback at the end of the first round and early second round. And Travis Kelce fell into my lap at the end of the first round. And I should have taken him. And I wasn't expecting it to him, because every mock draft I did, Kelce never fell there. He was always a top 5 pick. And what did I do? I went with the player I mock draft there. I took fucking Russell Wilson.
Oh, boy.
Yes. And took Jalen Hurts in the second. That was great. But yeah, podcast streamers can't see it, but Scott has a Let's Ride shirt on.
I have a goofy shirt that says "Let's Ride" with Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
People would like to see us.
So biggest thing, man, stay water. See what your league mates do and take those tendencies into account, man, because there are so many times, like, I know if I'm drafting with Eagles fans or Steelers fans being out here in Pennsylvania, I have to take that into account. Najee's going to go a little bit earlier. I'm not going to have a shot at Jalen Hurts. Those are the things you have to take into account. But great questions. Keep them coming here. Let's go on and move to Travis Kelce, who, Scott, this was one we were both very high on. Kelce, tight end 1 in 6 of the last 7 seasons, and age 32 seasons. I think we called it a little bit. We thought he might have career highs, and he delivered 152 targets, 110 receptions, over 1,300 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns. And, like, when you look at this guy, he is in a tight end slot. He is paid like a tight end, but he's 3rd in receptions, 3rd in targets, like, not just amongst tight ends, but this among everyone. Like, he is an alpha wide receiver in a 280-pound man, grown man's body.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made that Travis Kelce could be the number 1 pick, 101. There's an argument for it.
Wow.
I would never do it. Probably.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I might, but and basically, especially if there's any kind of tight end premium, but basically you hear it all the time, the advantage he gives you at the position. And in his case, and I looked at the numbers, I think in the last 15 years, 15 seasons, 2022, the distance between the tight end 1 and the tight end 2. So that advantage he was giving you over everybody, not between him and the tight end 12, but the tight end 2 was the highest of all 15 years of any position group. And that, that is, it's hard to put into words and convey how valuable that advantage is. Again, that's where my pitch would be, that if somebody took Kelce 101 in a PPR league, in a league I'm in, I would not be like, holy crap. I'd be like, interesting, because of the advantage he provides you. And I don't see it stopping, his value in Dynasty. It's starting to get a little fuzzy and gray area, because
it is. It's so hard to draft him in
really
Dynasty
hard to
right
figure
now.
out his value in Dynasty.
Yeah.
Because he's a little bit Derrick Henry-esque, and it's just like, is he ever gonna fall off? Ever. So, but yeah, I think I have a 104 or a 105 in one of my redraft home leagues, and like, I'm taking Kelce. I know no one else is going to take him. I'm taking him. And he's this top 5, like, normally in most years, I don't really want to be in the top 5. But honestly, this year, I would be happy with any of the players that we've mentioned so far as my first pick. So really being the 5th pick is a pretty ideal spot, because then you come around sooner in the 2nd round. So, and Kelce's part of that. He's part of that tier for me.
Okay, yeah. And I'll say this again, Scott. It was one of those things that early last redraft season, I think we probably did this show a bit earlier last year, maybe March or so, and I had Kelce as a top 5 pick. And when my redrafts came around, I just was lower on him for some reason, like general ADP is for tight ends, and I regretted it. I didn't have enough of them.
It feels weird to take a tight end in the 1st round. For me personally, the amount of redraft I've played since 2006, like, it's just.
There was Gronk and Jimmy Graham in the 2000 teens. You know what I mean? But outside of that, and those were always the back end. This is the middle of the 1st round. But yeah, I think we're dead on here, man.
Well, no, and I never ended up with either of those tight ends because I wasn't willing to take a tight end in the 1st round.
Right.
But I feel like from what I've learned over the years, but specifically once I got into this industry, I realized the benefit of it. I realized that it's okay. It's okay to leave the 1st round without a running back, guys.
Yeah. Well, it is sometimes, but sometimes you have Bijan Robinson up, who is our number 6 player. And this is one of the craziest hype trains that's about to start. And we've seen both sides of this coin in the last 5 to 7 years. We saw 2016's Ezekiel Elliott. He was pushed up to an RB1, top 6 pick in most redrafts that year. He delivered. We saw Saquon Barkley 2 years later in 2018. He delivered. Najee Harris, his rookie season, he delivered. However, we've also seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where never delivered that type of value. But Bijan Robinson, one of the best running back prospects we've ever seen here. But Arthur Smith, he has dampered prospects before. Kyle Pitts, Drake London. Is it safe to take Bijan at 6? That's the question here, because we know what the upside is. It's RB1.
It's not safe to take a rookie at the 6 overall. Like, it's never going to be a safe thing. We have no idea what's going to happen in the NFL with this guy. Me and a lot of other people have spent months like looking at rookies. And honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time on Bijan because it's just like, oh yeah, he's a friggin' stud. Like, I didn't have to do a lot of analysis on Bijan. But again, he's a rookie. He's playing for a team that's not very good. Well, I think Atlanta's going to be better.
I think they'll be better. Yes, we do believe
but
that.
He's not going into just a smash, best offensive line in the league, team that averages the most passes to running backs. He's not going into one of those types of scenarios. But you and I both had him right at this spot. And I have in my I put notes in on all these players that we put in this. The only thing I have written for Bijan is maybe a little high, ? That's all I have written, because it's really hard to tell. One thing that's good about his scenario is Atlanta runs the crap out of the ball. So that's going to be Bijan. That's going to be mostly Bijan. Tyler Algier was a great story and a great lesson in why later round running backs are dispensable, basically. But
get what you can out of him.
It feels a little weird taking him over people like Tyreek Hill or Saquon Barkley. You know what I mean? But I just think he's one of those guys where if he hits, you've got one of the best running backs in the league. But you're paying. That's why it's
paying
not
the
safe,
premium.
because you're paying at that price. So for me, like, if I end up with Bijan, it's going to be it's one of those picks I'll make where it's just like, all right, screw it, let's have some fun. Like, let's see what this rookie can do. I want to be the guy that has him and is just super excited as he goes off every week. But could there be some disappointment?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I love it, Scott. You just threw it out very bluntly, because that is the truth. And I think the one good thing about Bijan Robinson is if you take him at 6 or 7 here in your redraft, and let's say week 1 and 2 don't go how you want, you shouldn't sell him for penny on the dollars, but I think you're still going to get a lot for him. There's going to be someone who wants Bijan, no matter if it's a bad game or two to start out the season. So that's what I think. He's going to have instant name value in your league, and you could flip him for a ton. So that's why I do like Bijan at 6 here. I'm not afraid of it. It sounds like you're not afraid either, Scott, of the risk. It is a risk reward pick. Speaking of a risk reward pick, though, Cooper Kupp coming in at number 7. And this was our biggest discrepancy between the two of us here, man. You had him all the way up at number 3 overall. I believe you're wide receiver 2. I had him down at 10. And this is a guy who led wide receivers in fantasy points per game. I know you love that. I know that fantasy points per game. Like, Scott, there needs to be a metric or Scott's picture in the dictionary, the fantasy dictionary next to it, because this guy loves it. Second highest target share as well. However, there are question marks here in Los Angeles. What's the offensive line going to be? There aren't really a lot of other good weapons on this team outside of him either. There's the Ben Skoroneks. There's the Tutu Atwells of the world, the Cam Akers. And then what about Stafford's health? Is he going to be 100%? And Cooper Kupp also injured last season. So there's a lot of worries here, Scott, to be ranking him 3rd. That was bold, I thought.
There's concerns, but I'm assuming he comes back fully healthy. And again, this assumes Stafford is healthy too. Like, I will change my ranking if Stafford is not the quarterback. But Kupp, a little bit like Devontae Adams in my mind, I don't really care what the situation is. He always delivers. He always has. Last year, points per game. I do like to bring up points per game just because it's what they did when they played. But he was on pace. Like, when he got hurt, he was the wide receiver 1. Not including the game he got hurt. What was it? I have it written down somewhere. Not including the game he got hurt, he was below 20 points per game one time. He had that ridiculous wide receiver when he was the wide receiver 1, where he was a top 12 wide receiver in like 80% of the game.
It was crazy. Yeah.
So I just think if he's healthy, I think, 3 is a little bold. 3 is kind of paying at his ceiling, but he is also in that group for me with Chase, with Jefferson, who could be the wide receiver one. I mean, he was until he got hurt last year, and he was the year before. Like, I mean, the concerns you bring up are valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, that's, sometimes that's what you have to pay, for a potential number one overall at that position. So yeah, it's a little bold. I have him in front of Chase. I have him in front of Kelce, but I see him. I almost, if he's Cooper Kupp, then third overall could potentially be a discount.
It's crazy when you put it like that, man, because I probably do have him too low, being all the way down at 10, looking back at this now. But there were so many times I didn't have him last season on a lot of teams because I went Justin Jefferson over him at like the 4 or the 3 in some drafts. And, I didn't regret that, obviously, but I was just like, damn, Cooper Kupp just does not stop, so a lot of question marks there. Scott's willing to risk it for the biscuit. I'm going to be a little more cautious, but he's going 5 overall in underdog draft. So a little bit higher than we're
right in between us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of right in there. So I would take Bijan over him. I would take Kelce over him, and I would be very tough when we talk about our next player as well. However, I do want to address the chat once more here. Looks like Yeetman's back in the chat. He's saying last year was his first year playing fantasy. Well, welcome, man. Glad you got into it. He said he didn't do any mock drafts, and his team fell apart after the Hall, Kupp, and D-Hop QB injuries. Yeah, man, I was with you. Breece Hall almost in every single league.
Mean, like, looking at those names, Hall, Kupp, and D-Hop.
You had the nuts.
Week 2 last year, that's just bad luck, man.
Yeah.
That's getting those 3 players. Like, I'm a heavy Breece Hall fan.
Same.
So yeah, that's bad luck. It'll even out this year for you.
Absolutely. He's saying I'm not going to make any strategies for drafting because everything can change. Great. Was last year's ESPN ADP bad? I don't think it was bad. No, I did play quite a few leagues on ESPN. I usually do. I think the first round was pretty close to what like a lot of ADP was across the industry. However, like there's always some differences. Usually quarterbacks go a lot earlier in ESPN leagues for whatever reason. This year, not so much. I think the quarterbacks in some of these best balls are really going high, like second round. So, but it's always different. So I think like there are a lot of tools out there. Again, another Fantasy Pros tools. You can actually see different ADPs compared side by side. I think there's some others out there in the industry as well. So just kind of keep a hold of those tools and see. I don't want to say necessarily they're bad, but a lot of them, I think they actually just import Mike. Oh my gosh, yeah, Mike Clay's projection. Sorry, yeah. So it's different, man. But keep an eye out on it. Scott, let's go ahead. Let's talk about our next player here that I'm very interested in. I put him on the thumbnail for a reason tonight. It's Jonathan Taylor. Rushed for nearly 3,000 yards during his first 2 seasons, 33 total touchdowns after being just an exquisite Wisconsin Badger, man. RB1, RB6 seasons for him. But last year was a disaster. If you drafted Jonathan Taylor, he was last year's consensus 101, and to get the consensus 101 from a year ago all the way down here, maybe at 8 here, Scott, feels like a bit of a value when I'd still love that line. Quentin Williams, and I think there are a lot of really talented linemen on that front. They just have to get it together, and I think they will here under Shane Steichen. They have a great schedule, and I think Anthony Richardson's going to get it going as well. It's easier to be a better rusher when you have a mobile quarterback. However, Scott, you might not think so, and there are still question marks. Will Anthony Richardson cutting to the TDs that Jonathan Taylor could get near the goal line? Could the receiving work go down with a mobile quarterback as well? So what are your concerns possibly for Jonathan Taylor here?
So my concerns with Taylor, I think I have him at 10, so I'm a little bit lower on him than you, which I think if I'm on the clock and he's sitting there at 8, 9, or 10, I'll gladly take him there. But it's with Taylor, it's just more about the people in front of him I would rather have. And part of my concern with Taylor, again, it's not his talent. It's no secret. I listen to a lot of JJ Zacharyson late round QB. And his last 2 podcasts covered, last week it covered the impact of mobile quarterbacks on the other position groups. And today's covered the impact of rookie quarterbacks on
okay. Great.
And neither are good, relatively speaking. Neither are the other position groups to varying degrees. And this is just looking at it more as like the RBs of a team, the wide receivers of a team. So individuals can obviously buck this trend, but it's enough for me to be a little bit concerned about his situation because he has both a mobile and rookie QB. So I think like you said, I think it could cut a mobile. One of the reasons a mobile QB can be a little bit of a knock for the team's running back is because they do tend to score more rushing touchdowns and therefore taking those rushing touchdowns away from the running back. So, and I'm still just a little curious how this offense is going to work with Richardson in his first year. So I still like Jonathan Taylor. I still think he's going to be an RB1 this year. But I think this is just about right for him, based on the concerns that I have.
Okay. And I think what I come back to and why I see the upside is last season, Miles Sanders, 259 carries, nearly 1,300 rushing yards, and 11 TDs. If Shane Steichen was able to coach Sanders up and get that out of him, obviously behind a great offensive line, better than the Colts, but I think the Colts still have a top 10 offensive line here. So that's the upside for drafting Jonathan Taylor, I think, here. I think I had him maybe at 5 or 6 overall, so I'm a little bit more bullish than Scott is, but definitely have to go check out JJ's podcast there because I like to see, both sides of the coins in here, and I understand the concerns. I also see, do you think Jonathan Taylor still has RB1 upside overall, or do you not think he has that in here, Scott?
You did the overall RB1?
Yes.
I don't quite see.
Okay.
Just based on, you bring up a really good point about, the coach that I can't pronounce his name, coaching Miles Sanders. Although I will say Miles Sanders has always been a pretty good running back.
Yes, we are, baby. We are, yes.
So he's showing that once he actually isn't hated by his team. That is a good point. I just don't quite see the ceiling, especially, he doesn't, relative to guys like Ekeler and CMC and likely Bijan, he doesn't get the pass catching work, even in his RB1 year. His RB1 year, it was great. He was great, but it was one of the lower points per game for an RB1 in the last, it was like bottom 5 in the last 20 years as far as what it took to be the RB1 in that year. So I still think, like I said, he's an RB1, but I don't think he's the RB1.
Great point, man. I love that. Let's go ahead and move to number 9 here, Tyreek Hill. And this is a player we are both pretty high on. This is kind of the end of that second tier for me. I think 9, I want to be in that top 9 in a lot of my redrafts this season. And I'm just tired of fading Tyreek Hill. I came into last season fading him. I came into the season before fading him because there's all these question marks. But he was the wide receiver 2 last season. He's been a wide receiver 1 in 5 out of his last 6 seasons and career highs across the board. He did kind of, Scott, let down fantasy managers at the end, but Tua got hurt. He was playing with, just an assortment of young quarterbacks and was still decent, but not Tyreek Hill caliber. But now he has Mike White as the backup. Does that Tua get a little bulky here as well? Does that give you a little bit more optimism to take Tyreek Hill in the first round when, he was a value going in the mid to late second sometimes last year?
Yeah, I have Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 4. I have him ahead of Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Adams. He rounds out the group of 4 wide receivers that I think any of the 4 could be the wide receiver 1. Tyreek Hill was the wide receiver 2. There's a lot of talk about what about Jalen Waddle? He had a 30% target share last year. 3 wide receivers had a 30% target share, and he was one of them. I just think. And he did that with Tua missing basically the equivalent of 5 games because he got hurt in a game. So basically having that kind of quarterback carousel going on, he did it with that. If Tua's his quarterback all year, he could explode. And I am no longer fading him either. I've never really had him on my teams, and I can't really explain why. I don't like the person as much, but as far as the fantasy player,
that's what it is for me, I think, too. Yeah. Which
is fine. Totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I have him an 8th overall, 4th wide receiver off the board. So yeah, I'm all in on Tyreek. So if I can get him at 9, yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move to number 10 here. Saquon Barkley, running back, New York Giants. Contract negotiations still kind of putting this one up the air. We think he will be back. He'll sign either the tender or a new deal with them. And last season finally bounced back, and now he has 3 RB1 seasons in the first 5 years for Barkley here, Scott. How do you like him heading into 2023? Because I think he is worth, an end of first round consideration. Fell off towards the end of the last season, but he was used so heavily in the beginning. I think we saw it coming.
Yeah, he's another one where, I mean, honestly, the way this first round is shaping up, there's not a lot of spots where I'd be picking based on this, where I'd be disappointed with my pick. I mean, I foresee Barkley because he still has that name value.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be gone by 10, whether that's good or bad. But I think he's a deal at 10. He was still at an 80% opportunity share, 5th highest target share, amongst running backs last year. The Giants added 1 million wide receivers, but they didn't really add any guy that's just going to take all the targets away from everybody else. So I think he'll still be one of the, I mean, they added Darren Waller too, but Waller hasn't been able to stay healthy. So I think he'll still be, maybe 2nd, 3rd on the team in targets potentially. He can do that. He's done it. So I think he's also got a mobile quarterback in Daniel Jones. And yes, Daniel Jones is a mobile quarterback based on rush attempts per year parameters. So that could cut into his touchdowns a little tiny bit. But again, I still think he does, and a lot of it also is based on that target share. He has one of his outcomes as overall RB1. It is a possibility for him where I don't think it is with Taylor.
Okay, great. Let's talk about another NFC East player, AJ Brown. Finally got the alpha targets we've been looking for all of his career, really. 145 targets, 88 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 11 TDs. And this was just his first year with Jalen Hurts. I think that's something we need to consider here, Scott. And this is a defense that I don't think is going to be as good. They got younger, but they did lose TJ Edwards and a lot of good secondary help, CJ Gardner-Johnson most notably. And they don't have as good running back. So I think they're going to throw even more here in Philadelphia. And I think AJ Brown is the perfect target here at 11. Any thoughts on AJB?
I love it. He's another one of my favorite players in the NFL. I think the look of shock is stamped somewhere in my brain when the Eagles traded and got him during that draft last year.
Yeah.
But and I have him. I think I have him at 13, so I have him just right around this general range. I think my only concern is just the somewhat lazy. The other pass catchers that are there, they don't throw. Relative to the NFL as a whole, they don't throw. On the upper end of that. So is his potential volume capped? But if his targets go up, because he led the NFL in hog rate, which is just a fancy way of saying targets per route you've run, how many times you get targeted. He led the NFL. So I mean, if his targets tick up a bit, if their passing volume ticks up a bit, and his targets tick up a bit, and I think their passing volume will tick up a little bit just because they do have Rashad Penny, but they got Swift now, and so I think there's going to be more. Not league leading pass volume, but I think it's steadily been increasing since they rushed the ball over 500 times a few years ago. So he's another one. He's a great end of first round guy, and he could easily exceed that.
Yeah, he was a value last season going in the 3rd round, sometimes later. Wish I would have been on more AJB last season. How about CeeDee Lamb here? And this is a player, Scott, you're always a bit higher than me on. However, I actually think I can't. Yeah, this time I think I put Lamb at 12 and you had him in your honorable mentions here. Wide receiver 5 last season, almost 1,400 yards. And finally, we saw the touchdowns come with 9 of them. And it was a much more consistent CeeDee Lamb. That's what we've always struggled with Lamb. It's what we always struggled with Amari Cooper. However, Lamb kind of got it done last season, man. I mean, he was so consistent. Didn't win you your league, but didn't lose you your league either, which I think at pick number 12, that's kind of a guy. He's a steady Eddie, and that's what I'm targeting.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point. Typically, I've been higher on Lamb.
This is the first time ever I think I
don't really have my reasoning isn't really based on Lamb. It's not really based on any huge red flags I have with Lamb or the Dallas offense. It's based on players I just like better. Like in
Agreed.
my set of rankings, the receivers I have ahead of Lamb that aren't here are Devonta Adams, which I've already talked about him.
Yeah,
So
can't do that.
and I have Diggs ahead of Lamb as well. I think Diggs is he's getting up there in age a little bit, but like he's another one that just kind of, ever since he was just this steal of the draft a few years ago, when everybody thought that the change in quarterback was going to knock him. He was going in like the 5th round, and then he was, it was just
delivered. Yeah,
he was like Kupp. Kupp did the same thing the year he went off. And so with Diggs, I mean, in points per game, he finished as the wide receiver 5, 12th highest target share last year, and I mean nothing's really changed. Nothing's really changed in Buffalo, to be honest. I mean, his role is the same. They're a fairly pass heavy team, and they're one of the better offenses in the league. So I have Diggs. I have Diggs and Devontae as far as wide receivers go ahead of Lamb, but they're all kind of in the same tier for me. You know what I mean? Like they're all in the same tier. So I mean, to where if I get Lamb where I'm ranking him, I'm going to be ecstatic. You know what I mean? Like ecstatic.
Yeah. Awesome. Scott, before we mention the honorable mentions, if I had to ask you, what is your favorite pick for redraft this season? What number? You kind of talked about 5 earlier. You like that cutoff a little bit. Is there another pick that you like more than 5?
I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that, but I'm thinking 4 and 5, right in that range, just because the players I have right around 4 or 5, I kind of, the way I have it ranked somewhat is that group, any single one of them could be the number 1 overall at their position this year. With, in my opinion, CMC being a little bit more likely, Justin Jefferson being a little bit more likely. But that's, that in tier-based drafting, that's why I'd rather go to the bottom of that tier and get an earlier 2nd round pick. Because it's not one of those seasons where it's just, oh my God, the 101 is such an obvious, just no doubt about it, number 1. We haven't really had that much lately, to be honest. I mean, last year Taylor was the consensus, but CMC was my 1 last year too. So I kind of like it better that way, honestly. I like it when there's a whole the edge between the people at the top 5 of the draft is thin.
Agreed. Makes it much more interesting for us as analysts as well. Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I really like the 4 or 5 slot, and if I can't get one of them, I like that 7 or 8. I can still get someone like Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, maybe Cooper Kupp or Travis Kelce if one of those guys fall. So I really like one of those, and then we can kind of wrap it around here with our honorable mentions. These are guys that we would not take in the 1st round, but very close, or some of them we would actually, because I know, Scott, you had Stephon Diggs in your 1st round. You had Devontae Adams as well. I did not have Adams ranked in my top 15. But Derrick Henry, we didn't touch on Henry at all tonight, but Henry has been a force these last couple seasons as well. So early round 2 for Derrick Henry, sign me up on that. Garrett Wilson, he gets the electric. Aaron Rodgers now throwing him the ball. And we've already heard the Devontae Adams comps coming from now number 8, formerly number 12, Aaron Rodgers. And then Breece Hall, to me, I know he's coming off the ACL, but I love Breece Hall a lot. I think
if Breece Hall was not coming off the ACL, I would have him probably ranked right behind Bijan Robinson. He would easily be in my top 12 if he wasn't coming off. What he was doing before he got hurt, he was going to break fantasy last year. But then he got hurt, and it was the worst, saddest injury of the year for me personally. So I'm hoping he can Adrian Peterson it and just be right back to normal, but probably not. And that's why I have him in the 2nd round instead of the 1st.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. We got Hoove in the chat saying, "What's up?" Saying hi, Tushies. Not exactly sure what that means, but good to see you, Hoove, nonetheless.
Well, and Henry, I mean, you're right. It's hard. It's because the way I always look at it is, it's like I look at an individual player, but then it's not just the individual player. It's like, who am I going to put him ahead? Because it feels weird to have Henry not in the 1st round.
Well, and that's why, like, honestly, like pick 11 or something wouldn't be that bad either. If you could get like an AJ Brown and Derrick Henry, I would really like that.
Yeah, this is a year where it's pretty and I mean, I think we think this every year, but to me, there haven't been, we've disagreed on a few individual players, but I feel like there's not really a bad spot to draft from. There really just isn't a bad spot.
To me, I see a little bit of a tier break after these honorable mentions that we just talked about. I see a little bit of a tier break for me. So I really wouldn't mind kind of being towards that later half, still kind of towards the middle 7 or 8. But then you can get dicey. You can throw out a Mark Andrews if you're coming back in the second round, or a Jalen Hurts, even a Patrick Mahomes, or a Josh Allen. Like that's where the quarterbacks are going a lot of times here now. I know it's very weird for us redraft analysts here, Scott, to say that when for so long these guys have been 4th, 5th, 6th rounders, and we've said even that seems too high at times. But you look at the underdog ADP, and that's where the consensus has them going. So just something to keep in mind. So Scott, I love ranking that first round here with you. Let's go ahead. Let's round it out here. Some good vibes and some good news. All right, good news here. This is where we talk about some lifestyle or just some general good news out in the world. Bring a little good vibes back to the show here. Scott, I will start with mine. The major headline, I feel like, of the week, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers. He was spotted at the Taylor Swift concert, and he was vibing, man. Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to pull it up here if I can. But Scott, Aaron Rodgers gets like just this, this stigma, I feel like, that's just like, he's not fun. He's a weirdo, and like, he's an asshole. And like, let's just cue in on this video here. Hopefully we don't get taken down from YouTube for playing it. Zooming in on Rodgers. He's grooving, baby. Taylor Swift, shake it off. What do you think, Scott? What do you think about old AR8 now and the good vibes he was delivering there in NYC?
I mean, looks like he was having a good time at a Taylor Swift show, which I'm assuming most people have, have a pretty good time at a Taylor Swift show. I would have a really good time at a Taylor Swift show. I mean, I think it's fun, and you're right. It is fun. I mean, he's seen as, he's got a reputation. To me, this doesn't really wipe away any of that reputation. Maybe just a little. Maybe just a little.
I think we're not to. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember when I first saw that, I was like, I couldn't tell. I was like, is it really him, or is it just somebody that looks like him?
Yeah.
Because, little personal life thing. My brother John, he's a couple of years younger, looks exactly like Aaron Rodgers. Like we make fun of him.
Okay.
He looks exactly like Aaron Rodgers, depending on how he's got his hair and his facial.
Yeah.
So every time I see Aaron Rodgers, the first thing I think of is my brother, which is a nice thought. And then I realize it's Aaron Rodgers, and it's not as nice of a thought. But he was vibing. I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Good vibes coming from AR the first.
Yeah, man. This is just one of those things. Like, never judge a book by its cover. And I think like the media and us pundits like to really bury him sometimes. And I'll always I don't want to be a defender of Aaron Rodgers. That's not my goal here. I'm not trying to be that guy. But I mean, when someone's out there vibing and being themselves, like that's the biggest thing I like. And we push it here, Scott, is we try to be ourselves on this podcast. I like athletes to be themselves, and Aaron Rodgers is very much himself, and he showed it at the T Swift concert this weekend. Scott, any other good news for you as we head into the beginning of June and the summertime, my friend?
Well, I just want to quickly, just as far as good news, good vibes, good times, just give a shout out to the Scott Fish Bowl. Comes every year. It's always fun. I was fortunate enough to get an invite this year, which I guess it'll be my 3rd year, but forget that, I got an invite. Yes, that is fun, but just seeing the excitement on Twitter and just seeing the excitement from people, whether they've been in the Scott Fish Bowl before, whether they haven't, it doesn't really matter. You see people that have probably been in it for 10 straight years, and still you can tell they're genuinely excited about being in it again, because it's it's an awesome event. It's gained so much steam. It's one of my favorite parts about this community. I mean, shout out to Scott Fish, Ryan McDowell and John Bosch and all the other people that are involved. There's too many to name. All the people out there making logos, making avies for people, all that kind of stuff. I mean, just a quick side note, like I've got 2 different chats, Scott Fishbowl related chats going right now. One of them is my division from last year, which was the Parks and Rec division. And we created a dynasty league together, and we just had our draft, and it's super fun. And we communicate in Parks and Rec gifts, and that's right up my alley. And then the league I'm in this year is the Bluth Banana Stand, Arrested Development. So now I'm in a new chat group with GIF language going from one of my other favorite TV shows. So, I mean, just every little detail of the Scott Fishbowl League is just fun. So just wanted to give another shout out. Plus, it's a great cause. It's a great charity. And it's one of those things that I think brings people together. I've gotten new follows and followed new people and met new people and started interacting and started, that type of thing through the Scott Fishbowl. Like I said, I have a dynasty league now through the Scott Fishbowl. So, and that's not uncommon. I hear it all the time. Like there's chat groups I was in early on that like, it was called something, but they're like, no, this was a chat group that was started for pick 106 in the Scott Fish 3 years ago or something like that. So just as far as good vibes in the fantasy football community, I don't think it gets any better than the Scott Fishbowl. So shout out.
Yeah, shout out Scott Fish. Shout out everyone in this community doing good work. Shout out to you, Scott, as well, man. I can't thank you enough for riding along here on the In Between Fantasy Football podcast and everyone who tuned in tonight. Very awesome shows. We ranked the top 12, and we're going to have a lot more redraft content coming down the barrel here on the podcast and on the site this summer. So stay tuned, stay plugged in, guys. And until then, keep it in between.